And we have a lot of great content to get into. So I'm going to let you guys all continue introducing yourself within the chat. And I am going to jump into the intro and to bring you all into Artwork Archive's webinar, Building Sustainable Support, Proven Fundraising Strategies for Arts Nonprofits, joined with our incredible panelist and speaker, Kimberley Sherwood. So a few logistics before we jump in. You can access captions, which is viewable via the show captions icon at the bottom of your screen in the bar, in the support bar. If you are on an iPad or a tablet, you may have to hit the three dots to access that. For introductions, as you're doing, great job, and technical support, if you need any support throughout the webinar, please contact us through chat. My colleague Cassidy is helping out, and so she's there to answer any questions that you may have. And when it comes to questions for Kimberly or myself, please submit those through the Q&A. Again, a button at the bottom bar of your screen. We will have time at the end of this presentation to answer those Q&A live. And yes, we are recording the session. We send out the recording along with the slides, which have some great helpful resources linked to them at the end of the webinar. So a few days afterwards, we get that all edited up, uploaded to YouTube so we can share it out with you. Hello, I've already been talking, but I'm Elysian Kogelmeyer. I am with the Artwork Archive team. I am head of partnerships, and I have the joy of leading these webinars specifically focused for organizations, nonprofits, and collectors, and have been doing this for about 7 years with the Artwork Archive team. And if you're new to Artwork Archive, a little bit about us. So we are an online art collection management system, an online art inventory management system. So we are used by artists, collectors, and then organizations of all types. So nonprofit art centers, museums, academic institutions, public art programs, corporate collections, galleries, anyone with art that needs to digitize it and keep it organized and then share it out to make an impact. Those are the folks that we work with. And so collections of all sizes. So we will learn a little bit later the size of your institution, where you all are coming from. And we're global, so perhaps I haven't looked at the chat in a bit, but perhaps we have folks outside of the US tuning in. Cassidy is actually helping us from London today, so very appreciative of her time. I'm going to go back to Kimberley Sherwood, our incredible speaker today. I had the pleasure of meeting and hearing from Kimberley when I was at a Colorado Business Committee on the Arts session about fundraising. And so experienced firsthand the breadth and depth of her knowledge. And she is wonderful at presenting and will keep us on our toes, and we will not be bored. So I'm really excited to have her on this session. Her bio, which I am going to read so you can get to know her a little bit more before we dive into her content. Kimberley Sherwood has partnered alongside nonprofits for over 22 years to help them move from questions to clarity. As a nonprofit consultant, she has partnered with nonprofits like you all to solve challenges around financial health and fundraising, which we will dive into today, governance and board engagement, organizational restructuring, campaign strategy, planning and execution, strategic planning, and other important challenges. As a nonprofit facilitator, she's facilitated, just to name a few, board retreats and trainings, financial planning, action planning retreats, team building, and consensus around sensitive or controversial issues. And as a nonprofit coach, she leads executive coaching, which can be for individuals or for executive director and board president dual coaching, or for C-suite executive team coaching. Kimberley holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communications from the University of Utah, achieved CFRE status from the Association of Fundraising Professionals, is a graduate of the National Plant Giving Institute and the Alt MBA program, and is trained in the Technology of Participation, TOP method of facilitation by the Institute of Cultural Affairs. She's a sought-after speaker and trainer, which is why I'm thrilled to have her on today's webinar. So with that, Kimberly, I'll let you drive and take over.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Love seeing so many different folks from all over the country and even all over the world joining us today. Thank you so much for making time. I'm super excited to be here and talk to you about one of my favorite subjects, fundraising. So in just a moment, I'm going to share my screen.
And actually, Kimberly, I realized I forgot the key factor of this webinar, which is hearing who is in the room from our folks, right? Because we wanted to know your experience.
Oh, thank you.
Chat. Yeah. And I was so excited to get to you that I forgot about our poll. So Cassidy is going to launch a poll. We have two of them. One is to, thank you, Cassidy, to understand what types of organizations you're coming from, what types of collections you may be working with, your role within the organization. And apologies if your role is not identified here. Feel free to click other. And a key question going into this panel, this session, are you happy with the financial health of your organization? And then at the end, do you currently use Artwork Archive? Because there will be a little spot at the end where we talk about some like not hard, so actionable, some concrete was the word I was thinking of, some concrete ways that you can stay on top of your fundraising efforts. And so thank you for everyone for filling this out. I see the participation coming in. We are almost at 100% participation. Oh my goodness. A number of you, 33% coming from nonprofit art centers, 15% from academic institutions, 15% from mid to large museums. And we have some curiosity, 28% others. So we can look into the chat too to see what other types of organizations are present. Number of you, 28% are executive directors, 15% development officers, collection managers here in the room. Again, about 22% saying others, maybe where a number of us wearing a lot of the hats, 7%. And then, are you happy with the financial health of your organization? 23% say yes. Great, wonderful. 64% say no. So you are not alone. A number of us here eager to hear from Kimberly. And then 13% feeling indifferent. And then let's see. Okay, we have a lot of folks that are new to Artwork Archive. So welcome to our webinar. We host a lot of these across a number of topics to help arts nonprofits with the managing and the success of their organization. So thrilled to have you here. So that was our audience poll. We have another question to understand the financial the financials behind your organization, where you are coming in with your budget. So Cassidy, do you mind launching the next poll?
Yes, sorry, I'm getting on it.
Okay.
Okay, it is. Oh, stop sharing that one. There we go.
What is your organization's annual income? Thank you, sharing. This is anonymous. Thank you, everyone. We have about majority of the folks in the room have an annual income of below $1 million. I think we have had full participation, close to full participation. So we'll end the poll and share out the results. So as you can see, a number of you all coming from under the 5 million annual income mark. with a few scattered with income a little bit above. Kimberly, is that helpful to see?
Yeah, I think it is. This is pretty reflective of the sector, I think, and a lot of times it can be challenging when we think about fundraising strategies because of this kind of propensity more towards smaller organizations, but the organizations that are raising a lot of money are often much bigger. And so what I have found is that there's often a desire to want to just wholesale copycat what works for a university or what works for a healthcare system or what works for a big art museum to a small grassroots organization. And that's just not true. So we're going to talk a little bit, maybe not myth busting per se, but more about how to really think strategically and get into the essence of what really makes fundraising work. I'm going to bet that you're not going to hear anything particularly brand new, but my hope is that our conversation today, brief though it may be, will maybe help you create some new connections that you hadn't seen before, or maybe help you think a little bit more optimistically or strategically about your approach to income generation and fundraising in particular. So I've got a few slides I'm going to share with you, and please confirm, Cassidy and Elysian, that you all can see these slides well, and that there's not a lot of other goop on my screen. All good?
Limited goop. Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, great. So many of you completed a brief survey for us as we were thinking about this. It's very, very easy to try and kitchen sink fundraising. Well, let's talk about corporate sponsorship. Let's talk about grants. And what I realized in receiving all the feedback is one, um, I'm always excited to get people off the suffer bus when it comes to fundraising, that get away from the hand wringing and move from agonizing to organizing. And so your feedback was helpful for me and I think for Elysian as we were talking about today in really homing in on some of the things that can really make the biggest difference as compared to just offering a smorgasbord of sort of contemporary ideas that just, I think, continue to perpetuate the whack-a-mole tendencies around fundraising, particularly at year end and when we're getting nervous. So hopefully some of this will help both calm and inspire. Uh, so what I want to talk first about is sort of the focus of our conversation today. And as I was preparing, it occurred to me that this adage from Jim Collins was particularly useful when it comes to fundraising. And it is that greatness is not a matter of circumstance, but it is a matter of conscious choice and discipline. And a lot of times I see people fundraising and they're spending a lot of time and energy on things that don't necessarily work, or on legacy projects or legacy processes. Think holding events that no longer or never have really produced enough income to be meaningful. And so I want to talk about these three ideas around strengthening core relationships, diversifying and sustaining income sources wisely, and then aligning resources to mission. And that's really kind of the thesis for our conversation today and the key areas where we're going to put our time and attention. So let's begin with strengthening core relationships. And the thing that I want to say, and we'll talk about this again a little bit later, there are no shortcuts when it comes to relationships. We are human beings. And even if you are a grant writer working in that mode of that method of fundraising, which is writing, as compared to a major gift officer who might be doing direct interface with individuals, no matter what your approach is, or if you're receiving big contracts, let's say from the NEA or the Department of or the National Endowment for the Humanities or whatever, that you're still working with an individual. There's still a person on the other end of this. And I imagine you've heard that before. But this is why we wanted to start with the core of relationship building and sustaining relationships and really working from the inside of the organization to the outside of the organization. So these are a few practices that are particularly useful. Um, and I think this catchphrase down at the bottom is really what it's all about. Strong donor bonds, strong relationships really do enable and create tomorrow's impact. So consistent communication means that we're doing our communication consistently, not episodically, so it's count onable. People begin to rely on it. And even if you have a small shop, it might be that you're only communicating once a quarter or once a month, but that the communication that you're sharing is meaningful and relevant to the people who are receiving it. Now, depending on the kind of funding sources that you have or income sources, some of you may need to be communicating with the more retail donors, smaller individual donors, those people who are giving anywhere from $1 to say $10,000. Others of you may be working more at that major gift and perhaps institutional level. That's a different kind of communication that's needed. If you are working with foundations or corporations or maybe big statewide or federal contracted funding sources, again, different kinds of communication are needed. So it's not like we can ask every newsletter to handle every single constituency that we're working with. And we'll talk a little bit more about the importance of understanding your funding model so that you can have adaptive fundraising strategies that really meet that particular audience that you're working with. But this notion of really tuning in to how we're communicating and that we are providing meaningful information to people that help to strengthen that core relationship is really the concept behind this first idea of communicating consistently. Again, doesn't have to be a lot, but it does have to be consistent and it does have to be meaningful. The second idea here is demonstrating transparency. And this is, again, sharing useful financial information, useful impact updates that help to strengthen that idea of donor trust. And when we come at this approach to strengthening core relationships through the lens of trust building, it changes the way we think about connecting the narrative of what we want people to understand and how that might show up on a financial report, on an impact report, on even making sense of a P&L or an annual report or a balance sheet. So again, it's not just that we're, opening the kimono and letting all things hang out. It's that we're connecting the dots to help our relationships, whatever those donor relationships are, or funding relationships, understand and make sense of the impact that we are seeking to create and how that is then demonstrated through the ways in which we engage in expressing ourselves financially in a transparent manner. The next is personalizing stewardship. This is one of the things that I think is a great missing for many organizations. And it makes sense that we might miss it because there's a tendency to want to just, get her done and work through the day and get this off our checklist. But customizing donor engagement based on individual interests and giving motivations help donors see themselves in your work. And nothing says we don't value you more than the generic dear friend communication, right? And this is particularly important as you begin to use your data analytics to better understand the breadth and depth of the funding relationships that you have, and then using that data to think about ways in which you can communicate more consistently and begin to segment or segregate those donor populations into smaller universes that make it easier for you to communicate in a more customized fashion. Um, again, one of the biggest things I've seen as a blind spot is just talking to everybody at the same level. We talk to the retail donor the same way we talk to the major gift donor. And this just doesn't help people feel like they're connected to your organization. So again, personalized stewardship doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be a lot. The central theme here is that you can focus on creating stronger donor bonds, and that makes more of a difference than trying to get more donors. That, working from the top down and the inside out is the best way to really begin to ensure you're focused on strengthening those core relationships. And then, excuse me, finally here, this idea of reciprocal engagement. So a lot of times when we think about communication, we think it is to you one way. I'm dumping my bucket to make you, quote unquote, take an action. And really, what we want is this sense of reciprocity, that there's room for donors to ask questions, room for funders to offer feedback, to give you perspective, and that you are able to respond to that. And so when we're talking about, and we don't have time today to go through kind of what we call the asking matrix of how to sit down with somebody and have a meaningful conversation, it's a dialogue. It's a two-way street. So that's what we really mean by this idea of reciprocal engagement. So when we take these four ideas, these four principles together of communicating consistently, demonstrating transparency, personalizing stewardship, and reciprocal engagement, all of that works to really help strengthen the current core relationships that we have. And you always want to strengthen the core before you begin to expand. So the next thing we want to talk about is diversify and sustain revenue. And all of you have probably heard that adage, you need to diversify, you need to diversify, and you need to diversify. And the truth is that I believe you don't need to diversify willy-nilly. You need to be really intelligent and think about this wisely. So I'm going to give you a few tips on that. But the first thing I want to say is that you need to, and I want to encourage you and invite you to reframe your perspective from we have needs, please support our needs, to really thinking about the impact. And so even though these slides are coming in a sequence like this, and you're going to see ideas in vertical lines like this, I'd like you to imagine that the principles in this webinar are really more like a constellation or planets. They're orbiting around each other. They are complementary. One does not supersede the other, but they work in harmony and in concert with one another. So when we're talking about that consistent communication and reciprocal donor engagement and those four principles we talked about just a moment ago, they're all really informed by this idea that impact drives income, not the other way around. Said another way, people are not interested in your needs. They're interested in the needs you meet. Said another way, people don't invest in organizations' needs. They invest in organizations that meet needs. And the donors that you're working with are interested in the ways in which you meet the needs of your institution, which meets the needs of your identifiable public that you're seeking to serve or the cause that you're seeking to perpetuate. So one thing I found very helpful is to distinguish the two buckets of income in the nonprofit sector. Support is money that is given. Revenue is money that is earned. And for many of you, there are receipts. You have gates, you have membership. This is all fee for service. It's all income that is generated in a transactional way. Patrons, for example. Support is money that is given. And that's where fundraising comes in. And a lot of times we try and put this, smooch it into one bucket. All of this is fundraising, and it is not. All of this is income generation. There are two key buckets: revenue, money that is earned, and support, money that is given. So in this next slide, I'm going to show you a way to understand the breadth of our sector. And it may be applicable beyond just arts organizations, but I think it's also illuminating for us to see that in our sector, 80% of nonprofit income is earned. So think about if you're an arts education organization, or like Elysian talked about, the CBCA. It has a training arm that equips emerging leaders to serve on boards. And that's how she and I got connected. Well, people pay tuition. Tuition is a fee for service. So as you can see, private fees for service make up nearly 50% of the nonprofit sector. So be thinking about, how does that apply to your organization? 31% is earned uh, either through government grants or contracts. Where might that be true for your organization, especially if you might be affiliated in some way with a university or a hospital or another public entity? So, in this way, philanthropy is a subsidy. And that might be not necessarily true for each organization on this call. Some of you might be much more heavily philanthropically supported, but I find this is helpful to kind of bust the myth that philanthropy makes up the totality of the nonprofit sector. Typically, it's a subsidy, and for many, many organizations, it is a critical subsidy because receipts and tuition, tickets, membership don't really cover the fully loaded cost of doing the work that we need to do. So this then leads to the next way that we can think about diversifying and sustaining income, at least from a kind of a frame of reference. So it's very helpful to understand and just name. We live in the upside down in the nonprofit sector. Our expenses are often incurred before income is secured, or we have to design a program and invent it and figure it all out in order to pitch it or sell it to a funder. So we're already having to invest a lot of time and energy long before resources are invested. So I think just naming that, being able to say, we know that's a weird dynamic that we have to deal with broadly in the nonprofit sector. The second is understanding your funding model. And I say, don't be a copycat. Um, and what I mean is, like I started out at the beginning here, we don't want to, and it's not helpful or effective to just usurp or copy or model the way the nonprofit down the street does it. And a lot of times people say, and maybe this is something that you've heard around your tables, oh, well, people really, they support the kittens and the puppies more if they're more supportive of animal causes, or it's harder for us because we don't help children, or we're not a healthcare organization, or we're not an education, or we're not this, or we're not that. So I'd like to invite you to really name what you are. And again, this goes back to really understanding that impact drives income, and release yourself from the suffering of we're not this and we're not that, and there are all these other entities that are raising more money than we are, and really identify for yourself the funding model that best supports you. So I want to point you to Bridge Span Group if you're not already familiar with them. And they're doing leading research in this realm. They have a great article, 10 funding models. It's from about 2012, published in Stanford Social Innovation Review. Excellent. But what's really cool is that they are now updating all of that based on 10 years of living through that initial research. So they're holding webinars and they're producing resources. They've got some great tools for how to engage your board in fundraising. But all of it comes down to really homing in on understanding your funding model and not just copying what others are doing, but naming yours for yourself and really owning that, and then letting that drive your fundraising strategy. Often we just start with the fundraising rather than understanding the complexity of the economic model of the sector, our own funding model, and then our own internal economic model for our organization. Uh, so fundraising happens well after doing some of this more foundational work. Another key thing that really helps to support and sustain income is a commitment to financial health. So again, I'm all about ending the suffering as much as we possibly can. So moving, from the shadow. So a lot of times fundraising gets segregated to the corners of the organization, really bringing it into the heart of who you are, and not just moving or allowing the people who manage the money or are the fundraisers to be responsible, but that everybody in the whole organization is championing smart spending and saving. And we're doing this all together. That means departments aren't competing or people aren't operating on, there's still money in my budget, so I'm going to spend it. This is where, and I don't want to go into too much of a rabbit hole, but this is where having good financial policies can really support effective fundraising. So this commitment to financial health is one we encourage every board and every leadership team to really discuss in a deep and strategic way, identify the commitment that the organization holds to really bolstering capital for the long haul, not just meeting, that the golden GOS, general operating support, but really thinking for the long term. And then finally, making a commitment to income-based spending, which connects to financial health. And this is really focusing on intentional program-based budgeting, which identifies the fully loaded cost of doing every single program. So taking your program through a deep financial planning lens and looking at the all of the indirect and the direct expenses, the variable and fixed expenses for each program, the number of people who are served through that program. And what this helps us do is not only see the fully loaded cost, but it helps us identify where we might be able to express units of service that can help inform the way we ask for fundraising levels, naming those services related to our programs. It also helps us understand where can strategic investment really make a difference from philanthropy. So I've got some great resources that Elysian will share with you, party favors after today's webinar, to help you if you're interested in this. Um, so the next thing we want to talk about, and I'm going to come back to this fundraising bit in a moment, is really this third principle for today's webinar, and that is aligning our resources with our mission. So we just talked a moment ago about the importance of a commitment to financial health. And we talked about the importance of income-based spending informed by program-based budgeting. What that helps us do is advocate for comprehensive funding. And what that means is we are able to see the role that every single person plays in the organization's impact. The role that every single person plays in the organization's impact. So we don't just want to champion getting through the end of the fiscal year without going into the red. Now, sometimes that I understand that needs to happen, but I'm hoping that today you'll begin to see there's real power in, wouldn't it be great if everybody on this call felt good about their financial health? We weren't at 24%, but we were at 100%, or we were trending toward that 100% where everybody feels solid about their financial health so that our fundraising is really powered up by that sense of confidence and strength. And we understand the fully loaded requirements to deliver on our mission. Um, the second idea here is, and this goes back to that commitment to financial health, is the board's commitment, but also their action to the operational core, that they understand and are standing shoulder to shoulder with you all in supporting a strong company, a strong operational capacity, not just like, well, we can't do that because we don't have enough money. Now, that doesn't mean that we're spendthrifts and have flush, fat budgets. What it means is that there's a commitment and an ongoing conversation to understanding the critical importance of a healthy operating budget to support the mission. And then the third principle, which again, these fold in on each other a little bit, is this alignment around sustainable growth for the organization. So Collins talks about it in this way. I've got a little book, and this is I think, really helpful way of thinking about what do we mean by mission-aligned sustainable growth. If you all don't know this book, it's a great one. It's an oldie, but a goodie. I refer to it like a chocolate tort. It's tiny, but very rich. Um, and he talks about what is a great organization. They are able to deliver superior performance. They make a distinctive impact, and they achieve lasting endurance. And the way that we do that is through really ensuring we're mission aligned and that we're focused on sustainable growth, not just meeting the tyranny of the present, not just meeting our needs for today, and not just meeting those needs for our constituents today, but that as leaders, we have an eye on that long-term, lasting endurance as an organization. And particularly for you folks, we don't want you to go out of business, right? There are nonprofits that people say, oh, it's great if we go out of business. But for the work you're doing, you're sustaining the joie de vivre for all of us, right? You're really enabling us to see the connection between the legacy of previous collections and work that has been done and how we make sense of that now and what that means going into the future and creating conditions for future expression, which is fundamental to our human experience. And so, you're not ever going to want to go out of business. We really need you to invest in lasting endurance. And that's part of what Artwork Archive is all about in terms of really coming alongside and supporting you in this way. So that then leads us to really thinking about this idea of supporting the core. And I don't need to tell you all the critical importance of collections care. You know that. But sometimes it can be perceived perhaps as rather dull or sort of, a dusty pursuit, rather than a meaningful and meaning-making pursuit that helps us ensure not only for today, but that future generations can understand our human experience. And so it's not just about, the right temperature and the special gloves and the building. And of course, I don't really know your work, so it's rudimentary, I realize. So if I'm offensive, I apologize by my lack of understanding of the complexity and the importance of your work. But the point is that for you folks, how you take care and steward is fundamental to the mission of your organization and the work that you're doing in the world. And then again, going back to what do we need the board to understand? And I'm just really huge on this. Just think it's vitally, vitally important as a sector that we really understand the importance of investing in our staff and really building capacity, because it's the humans that are the engines behind this. We're the engines behind innovation. We're the engines behind stewardship. And I think the sector is just starting to wake up to this. I see it in my coaching practice where more and more leaders are beginning to say, I need to help my team thrive, not just survive, not just get through this season or that season. Um, and then finally, the really being able to articulate that by investing in who we are and the core, it enables us to really have this more significant impact on public engagement and helping people understand that the behind the scenes stuff is actually critical. I was on the board of the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center, and we had so much success with bringing people behind the scenes of our theater, of our school, and of our collections to help them understand, this is what's in the basement and why it matters. So again, this capacity for us to connect our fundraising to the core of who we are is what really drives that impact to income ratio. All right. So here are a few evergreen fundraising principles. They're going to be redundant with what I've said, but I hope that they are helpful to you. The importance not just of building a strong foundation, but of sustaining a strong foundation for your fundraising efforts that connects with those ideas of the funding model and your commitment to financial health. This whole notion of donor engagement and renewal. And I love that idea of renewal and refreshment, right? Sometimes our fundraising can get static, it can get stale, and there's so much room for us to reinvigorate it, to reimagine, and really bring a refreshing sense of the future we're seeking to create together. Again, these ideas of diversifying and sustaining our income streams and really making sure that we understand that the diversity is more about identifying your major, minor, and opportunistic streams and diversifying within those streams than, doing this large scatter shot. Again, copycat of a lot of other organizations. I'm big on being very donor centric. If you don't know the work of uh, my friend Penelope Burke. She has written many, many great books on donor-centered fundraising. There are a lot of good tips in there, but really putting the donor at the heart of this conversation instead of, again, the ATM buttons that we're just seeking to, what's the magic code to get the money out, right? This is a human experience, fundraising, whether you're writing a grant or whether you're doing major gifts or events, uh, um, or the retail fundraising, really putting the donor at the heart, making them the hero of the story is a critical piece of this. And then finally, data-driven decision making. AI is very exciting. Some of you might not like it, but it's here. More and more entities are using it. And I think in a competitive marketplace, being savvy and smart about that, even if you're a small shop, that you're not only data-driven decision making, but you are also using AI to help you make those good decisions. Ultimately, at the end of the day, these are all just techniques, and there is no shortcut for focusing on relationship building. So, in the end, this is really the concluding idea here that sustainable fundraising is about building on what we know works, focusing on strategies that grow and keep people engaged, choosing impact over hype, and committing to methods that have consistently fueled your mission. And so if you do take a page from Bridgespan, you'll see that they've got a lot of ways to really engage in conversations about that can be helpful, and staying true to proven approaches that genuinely foster these connections and relationships. So I'm hopeful that you will take today as an invitation to invest in your future that is as resilient as it is inspiring because of the meaning that you're making in the world, and that will enable you to really strengthen your fundraising with even more purpose and drive. So we've got a few things we want to share with you from Elysian, and then we'll have a quick focus conversation and chat about your questions. And so I just want to say thank you before I pass it back. And invite you to connect with us on LinkedIn. We have a little newsletter that we send out once a month. We'd love to have you join our community. Thank you.
And I will share out those links as well in the follow-up so people can get in touch with you, Kimberly. And thank you so much for that presentation. My video was on and I was just nodding along. So I'm wearing my Artwork Archive hat, but I'm also the board treasurer for the National Organization for Arts and Health. And so I've also been taking a lot of notes because there's so much to learn from your expertise. There was a question in the chat before I get into my slides very quickly, before we get into Q&A, about that Little Chocolate Torte Red Book. If you could repeat the title and the author name, please.
Yes, this is Good to Great for the Social Sectors by Jim Collins. And he wrote Good to Great as a business book, but then he realized there's so many nonprofits that people say, oh, well, you should just run your nonprofit like a business. And he was like, nope, business thinking isn't the answer. And so this is a really nice myth buster. It's a great device for board members to also think about sense making around impact and endurance and investing. So great, great book. Love it. As you can see, mine is dog-eared and it's dusty and old, but I use it all the time.
Great. And there is a question about engaging board members. And so we'll make sure to get to these Q&As. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time with the tactical. So Kimberly gave some great strategies and some great tactics moving forward. A bunch of you may already have a donor management system. Wonderful, great. Some of you may not. You may not have a CRM. Some of you may have an art database. And if you're, for the folks in the room, in the virtual room that are using Artwork Archive, we actually have a CRM within our collection management system so that you can practice a lot of what Kimberly was sharing. And so the things that come top of mind are, enlivening our collections. They are dynamic and showing the breadth and the impact that they are doing. And so not having them just stored away in storage or on gallery walls temporarily, but showcasing your entire collection, including those that your donors have gifted into your collection virtually. So bringing them online. So for the folks that use Artwork Archive, you know that you can bring your collection and your exhibitions online with public profiles. You can also embed onto your own website. So you can get those donor attribution lines up there immediately after the gift once it is received. And then also with the dialogue conversation and the engagement that Kimberly mentioned. These days, I'm seeing a lot of institutions collecting oral histories, videos. It can be from the donor, it can be from the curator about the impact of these donations, and those can also be shared out publicly and be held as a resource for the legacy of the institution. And so here is an example, the Lilly Museum of Art, the University of Nevada, Reno. They are so wonderful. They brought their collection online. And this is a long quote, but the standout truly is that they found new patrons, or I should say new patrons found them by going online, and they discovered the Lilly by, for the Lilly, they might have been Googling artists that they were interested in or artists that perhaps are in their collection. And then they found the Lilly's collection and started a conversation. And so, this helping folks discover you and that you don't always have to do the boots on the ground knocking on the door, especially if you have limited resources. Another thing that I've seen work effectively when it comes to fundraising, and I have a number of articles which are linked at the end of these slides, is hosting online exhibitions to fundraise. This is a screenshot from the Winter Park paint out through the Alban Polacek Museum in Florida. And every year they sell artworks on site and virtually. And so then they can expand the scope and the engagement. It's not just the folks that can walk into the gallery space. It can be family members, colleagues from across the country that may be interested in this work and can contribute. And the same thing, there's a quote at the bottom from Arts and Health at Duke. I see a few hospital folks engaged in this webinar. They host a fundraiser in which they sell artworks. And again, patients, families, doctors that have moved on to other institutions can still engage and throughout the years. And then again, with the dialogue that Kimberly shared, another great thing that you can do from your art database, and if you're using Artwork Archive, is you can create private viewing rooms to engage and communicate with your donors and those that you are cultivating, people that you might have met at an event. So someone that you met may be interested in perhaps the work that you're doing to support local artists. So you can quickly curate, pull together a collection of all of the works of local artists to share with them, and they can view it and peruse it. And it's not on this screenshot, but they can also, again, you can have dialogue. They can send a message. They can favorite a piece. Also, with donor relations, perhaps you have a lot of something that this donor wants to give to you, and you want to show them in a kind way, a thank you. But as you can see, our collection has a number of these wonderful works. So let's continue the conversation of where your impact and your interests can continue to work within our organization. And then, this may seem really simple, but I just wanted to point out to those that use Artwork Archive that it's really easy to stay connected with your donors. There's a question that I want to get to in the Q&A about how do you stay connected with your donors, especially if that staff member is no longer with the organization, right? So with the CRM, if you're using Artwork Archive within the contacts feature, you can keep track of your communications, what you have shared out. You can track the donor feedback and their interests. And so you can create tags. So again, if it's for local or female artists or educational programming, or programs that serve children, whatever it may be. And you can also use this not only for your donors but those that you are cultivating. So the volunteers and the supporters that are engaging. So you can follow those breadcrumbs and continue the impact of the work. And then one just fun thing is that you can set reminders within Artwork Archive, if you didn't know that, to boost connectivity and decrease donor attrition to make sure that you are staying on top of it. And so again, with the public side of things, with sharing out your collection, boosting that transparency, that trust that donors see that their work is being amplified. You're also helping donors see themselves in your work beyond just their gifts. Oh, and this slide, you'll receive it after the presentation. But the other fun thing is that when you send something from Artwork Archive to your contact, then it's saved. So you can keep that record of years of what you have been sharing and communicating out with your donors. You'll receive these resources along with the resources that Kimberly mentioned at the end of this webinar. I want to make sure, because we have some really good questions, that we take the time to answer them. So first one, I'm going to go in chronological order of who submitted their questions. Kimberly, how do you strengthen core donor bonds or any relationship while not relying on individuals in the institution to be the one with the relationship? So when they leave, the relationship doesn't break down.
I'm going to just flip it totally on its head. And that is because this is all relational. These are human beings. The question really is, how are you building that interstitial tissue on your team? And there should be multiple people who have relationships with donors. Now, this might fly in the face of sort of a kind of more higher ed approach, which is everybody's assigned their portfolio of donors. And that's important, right, for working those prospective donors and probable donors and current donors, renewals, et cetera. But what I have found is that people are going to leave, and it's just a matter of time. So we've always got to create this connectivity between one-on-one engagements where a major gift officer or a development director might exclusively hold that relationship, or the executive director. And one way is through all of your donor stewardship activities. And then, of course, I'm a huge advocate of when people leave, that there is a very strong, warm handoff and focus on relationship building. Now, that's not always available if somebody has to scoot out of there, without time to do it. But I think, again, when you're thinking about a lasting endurance, it begins to reframe how you focus on building those relationships and sustaining them. So I put all the people engaged in it. This is what I mean by everybody's a fundraiser, everybody's committed. The curatorial staff can have relationships. We really want to build out a very connected approach where the institution has multiple nodes of connectivity with these folks.
That's great. And then can you talk more specifically about how very young organizations can establish effective fundraising strategies?
Yeah, I think for very young organizations, usually founder led, the adage I would say is fish close to the boat. So finding your community, and I think this goes to the next question that we're going to talk about in terms of board engagement, but really being able to identify the one, two, three, four, five, maybe 10 people, institutions that can help you. You don't have a lot of capacity. It's not like you have a fleet of 10 major gift officers or even two or maybe not even one. You may be just a solo person. So it's got to be really manageable. And so our adage is fish close to the boat, stay where the water's warm, and work from the inside of the organization out.
That's great. And then it does lead into the board. So how do you strengthen the board to confidently use their network to support?
Yeah, so I love treasure mapping. I think that's a really great technique. People don't use it enough because what I think we do is tend to think, where are the rich people? And I'll go hit them up. So treasure mapping is a technique where you put your organization in the middle, you draw some sticks on a piece of paper out from there, and you think about all the various communities that you come into contact with. Once you've done that, and you can actually scale this down to have individual board members think about their own network. But it's often good to start with the organization so they can see all the various kinds of entities and partnerships that we're in connection with. So once we've done that, we look at what those big buckets are. Then we identify what's in their self-interest to know more about who we are and what we do. And then what might they have in abundance to give to our organization? In some cases, that's money, but in a lot of cases, it's a network or it's a relationship or it's the potential to collaborate. So I like doing it at the organizational level first and then having every single board member do a treasure map. And you could do this even just for annual fund, let alone it's great for capital campaigns too, because we don't realize we have a network that we can actually tap into. And when we come at it from this perspective of what's in their self-interest, this is an empathetic way of beginning to look at our networks and then their self-interest, and then what might they have in abundance to give. And once we do that, then I've got a little list of people that I can begin to feel confident about reaching out to, whether it's my book club, my gym buddies, my church, alumni, you name it. You just begin to go around the circle of what are those various clusters in your own personal network. So I found that to be extremely effective for calming people down and building excitement about, oh, I do know. I'd love to share this with my family. I'd love to share it with these friends. So great technique that I've found really handy.
I love that. So we're at time, but we have one more question if
Yep,
you're willing. Okay,
yep.
great. It's a really great one. So an arts program housed within a social services organization often gets told that they're not enough of a traditional fit for the arts funding, but arts don't get social service funding for arts. So do you have suggestions for impact strategies when crossing funding categories?
Yeah, I think that one, it's hard. So I'm going to give you an example of an organization this is analogous. So you'll have to do your best to make this connection of what it would mean for you, but this is an analogous example. So we have an organization in Denver. It's actually a regional organization called Project Angel Heart, got animated during the AIDS crisis. It is a food as medicine provider, provides all kinds of nutritious meals for people that are living with either very chronic illnesses, like think renal disease, or very acute illnesses, think a stage 4 cancer. And they were relying completely on grants and philanthropy. But after the Affordable Care Act uh, got underway, it created an opportunity to really speak to uh, public entities about the importance of nutrition as a component of healthcare. But that's very different than talking about the philanthropic emotional part of this. This is about actually, can you prescribe nutrition as part of the healing or the medical approach to supporting this patient's condition. And because they've been doing this for a long time, they had a lot of good data on how their nutrition helped to reduce trips to the ER, help to improve recovery. There's a great example, this woman who needed a lung transplant, and because of this, she was not able to receive the lung transplant she needed without the nutritional food. It just she was not her body was not capable of receiving this life-saving treatment. So it's data like that that really help them begin to make a very strategic case for the impact that moving beyond just, hey, can you give us a few dollars to do this philanthropic work, to really having strategic relationships with healthcare institutions and big public payers, if you will. So hopefully that's enough of a story to get your wheels turning. Because it took time for them to do this, and they're still working that. And other entities like theirs are doing that in other communities. So there may be some other communities out there that are also in your position that you might be able to learn from. This is where copycatting is good.
Right, right. Full circle. And I really appreciate that closing because, the arts, there is so many cross opportunities, right?
Oh,
Arts
yeah.
and health being one that's top of mind because the next Artwork Archive webinar is mid-November, and we'll be sharing it out with our newsletter, is all about arts and health because it's Arts and Health Month in November. But it's fundraising time all the time. So thank you to Kimberly for your time, your expertise, your enthusiasm. That was wonderful. And there's some wonderful thanks in the chat. Again, this has been recorded, will be shared out, will live in perpetuity on our webinar page. We will send out the slides that have the resources. And feel free to get in touch with Kimberly too as follow-up. And then there is, last but not least, a survey. As you close down this webinar, feel free to give us your feedback. If there's any topics you would like to see in the future, please share those as well. I'm getting 2025 underway. And with that, again, thank you to Kimberly. Thank you to all for sitting through, especially past time. Appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.